Did you get nervous today when the text was being read? First of all, Sandra read part of it before her prayer, and then Becky read it again, the Magnificat. Did you get a little bit nervous during that time? Mary says, "My soul rejoices in God, my Savior, who has scattered those who are proud in their inmost heart. God has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. God has filled the hungry with good things, but sent the rich away empty." Did you get a little nervous? Which side of that am I falling on? Well, while this reveals God's call for justice, it can sound like a manifesto to banish the uppity, or a radical call to arms to storm the castle, or a bomb dropped on the status quo which allows the rich to get rich and the poor to get poorer. With those verbs scattering and bringing down and sending away, you'd think that Mary was the leader of a band of guerrilla fighters bringing hope to the poor and making the rich build better security systems. I can see why oppressed peoples would interpret Mary's song in this way. Desperate people seek desperate means just to survive, let alone discover equity. We can see how those who lack social standing and status, like shepherds and women and children, are more likely to listen to this offer of shalom and salvation, while those who are Mary's, quote, mighty, the powerful, the intelligent, the successful, share a perfectly normal propensity toward self-interest and self-congratulation. While there were, in Jesus' day, many small bands of militants rising up to overthrow Rome, hoping that God would join the battle in some supernatural way and conquer their oppressor, Jesus does not teach this message. When Jesus sends out 70 followers 4 or 5 chapters later in Luke, 2 by 2, into the villages to heal and cast out demons, their first job is this. When they come to a house, they say, "Peace be to this house." The Gospel of Luke is showing us the way to peace. The angels announce peace on earth at Jesus' birth. And then later, there are 2 chapters in which Jesus tells us the things that make for peace. At the very beginning of Luke, God, who is that presence at the center of all things, that holds all things together, this God, we discover, does not work as a wrecking ball, knocking things down. Rather, he works through a pregnant woman. In a sense, Mary is the image for all who seek to be transformed by the way of peace. Pregnancy is the metaphor for those who seek joy and justice. Because a pregnant woman is transformed physically, mentally, and spiritually by having to make a space to care for another being. Now, I realize it's always dangerous for a man to speak of pregnancy in any way, since I've not had any first-hand knowledge of it. I always fear, a volley coming out from the women, well, how would you know? Okay, I get that. But I have observed the glowing state of which many women speak during pregnancy. I have observed that it is not always peaches and cream. The body shifts, the back aches, nights become sleepless, taste buds go wild. Your emotions are mountains and valleys with no flatlands in between. And yet, there is this overarching joy. Because you are making a space for another being in your life. And it is through this process of making space for others that God works to bring joy and justice into the world. The way of pregnancy is the way of peace. I grew up with a ping pong table in my basement. I played ping pong a lot. I got to be pretty good. And then when I got to college, I was very happy because there was a ping pong table in the basement of the freshman men's dorm. And I saw a way to make a name for myself, a way to elevate myself over the other guys. I beat a lot of guys who came wandering into the ping pong room. My reputation grew. Yeah, I was good. And I knew it. Word of my prowess spread to the upperclassmen's dorm. And one day, a fellow walked into the ping pong room with a ping pong paddle in a zipped-up case. I had never seen this before. He unzipped the paddle, took it out, and said to me in a very kind and nice way, "You got time for a game or two?" And he took the paddle and he held it, but not the right way, where the handle comes in to your palm this way, and the paddle itself is up here. No, he held it like this, so that the handle came up here, and the paddle was down below under his limp wrist. "Sure, I have time for a game or two," I said. And we started to play. To make a long story short, he beat me 3 games in a row. And I never scored over 10 points altogether. After the 3rd demolition of my pride, he said, "Look, don't feel bad." He said, "I don't play ping pong much here at college because I grew up in Japan where my parents are missionaries, and everybody in Japan, at least where we live, plays ping pong. And so everybody gets really good at it. And here in the USA, I beat almost everyone, so I don't play a whole lot here. It looks like I'm the best, right? Yeah, but I know that one trip to Japan will just show me otherwise. So don't worry about it. Let me buy you a Coke." And we headed off. He bought me a Coke, and I started my first upper-class friendship. You see what happened? See, he was pregnant with friendship. He made a place in his life out of his humility for me, and because he had done that, I was able to make a place, embarrassed and defeated as I felt, in my life for him. God has scattered those who are proud in their inmost hearts, which I certainly was. Another obvious thing about pregnancy is that it takes time. Often we get ourselves into a tizzy because we get impatient with ourselves or other people, or we get impatient because the inequities of this world incense us in such a way that a part of us just wants to take matters into our own hands and make things right. I remember years ago at a Christian retreat, a fellow with a t-shirt, he had on a t-shirt that said, "Shoot 'em all and let God sort them out." That's exactly what I thought. I didn't imagine that he saw himself among those who would get shot. It's this kind of impatience that leads us to violate Jesus' pathway to peace. It takes time. we need to be patient with ourselves and with others. I've told some of you the story of a reporter who was covering Cesar Chavez's boycott of lettuce in the 70s in order to change laws in California to protect migrant workers. It all led up to a vote. And when the vote came to be, the proposition was defeated. And the reporter went with Chavez's followers back to their center, only to find them feasting and drinking and dancing. Why? He asked Chavez. Why are these people so full of joy? They lost the vote. Chavez said, they are happy because they are together, one people, standing for the rights of those who have no rights. For now, we lost, but we are standing for the right thing, and that is cause for celebration. A pregnant woman knows that the baby is coming. There is no doubt about it. It's going to happen, no matter what you think. But it's going to happen on its own timetable. And finally, the way of peace to which Mary's song points, that joy coupled with justice, holds a basic assumption, which all people, you and me, respond to in one way or another. And that assumption is this: that all people are children of God, made in God's image. And because God is good, all people are, at the core, good. This is why the message of Luke comes to us through a baby born to peasant parents without any accomplishments, without any status, without any wealth. Jesus is good not because of a position that he holds or an accomplishment that he made, but simply because he is the Son of God. And so we, too, are sons and daughters of God. The implication is, in the Magnificat, that all of this is going to work itself out in society in some way. There's the upping, and there's the downing, and there's the kind of commonness that it leads us toward. I don't know how it's going to work itself out. But the root of justice and joy lay at this place. The assumption that all people are good and therefore all people can live together in peace. There will be justice and there will be great joy for all. I don't know what it's going to look like, but maybe something like this. It's a story I was told recently of African folklore. It's about a tribe that does a most beautiful thing. There is a young man who has done something hurtful. He's taken more fruit at the market than he had paid for. And the vendor saw it and sent out the call to the tribe. And all the people came in, passing the call on to others. Come to the center, come to the center. And when they got there to the center, they all sat down. And the chief asked this young man to sit on the ground in the middle as his entire tribe surrounded him. And one by one they stood as they remembered acts of goodness that he had done in his life. I remember the time when my daughter was a toddler, a woman said, and she had fallen on the ground into a nest of ground bees. And you were playing a game with the other children, but you heard her cry as she was stung. And you ran over to her and you picked her up and you brought her to me. And she had had several stings and she was crying and crying. And you had a few stings yourself. And you handed her to me and said, I'm sorry. You are a good person, the woman said. And the tribe said in unison, you are a good person. And another stood and told told of the time that he had helped one of the elderly members of the tribe who had sprained an ankle and couldn't walk. And so this young man took this elderly man's pot and walked 2 miles to get water for him and 2 miles back to give him his water for the day. "You are a good person," the man said, and the tribe responded, "You are a good person." His uncle stood and said, "You have shown respect for your mother, your father, and all of your ancestors. You are a good person." And the tribe responded, "You are a good person." And one of his teachers rose and said, "When your face breaks into that wide smile, others are blessed. And if something strikes you as funny, uproarious laughter comes deep from your belly, and all those who are in the class would end up doubled over in laughter as well. You are a good person." And the tribe responded, "You are a good person." And this went on and on as they remembered all the good acts of his life. One day was over. They ate supper. They went to bed. The next day they got up and all came to the center, and they started reciting the good acts that he had done in his life, until finally no one had anything else left to say. And then the chief stood up and he said, "Every human being comes into the world as good, each of us desiring safety, love, peace, happiness, joy. But in the pursuit of those very things, sometimes people make mistakes. Your community sees your misdeeds as a call to remind you what we all occasionally forget, that you are at your very center and core good because God made you. This is your true nature from which you were temporarily disconnected." And the young man stood up and he looked at all of his tribe members in the eye and said, "Thank you. I'm sorry for what I did, but I remember now who it is that I am. I am a good person." A society can make a space for others to know truly who they are. Christmas is such a feast. All of us gathering around those tables, that are full with all kinds of marvelous food. And our family and our friends join in around the tables. There's your crazy uncle. There's your grandpa who keeps telling the same stories over and over again. And there's your aunt who's a bit persnickety, and if you have spill something onto the tablecloth, you try to hide it from her because you know what she's going to do if she sees it. And then there are all those gifts under the tree that are given. And it's such a marvelous feast and celebration. But it has only one point. Only one. And that is to say that you are good. And that those around the table are good. And that your persnickety aunt, she's good. And your grandpa who tells all the same stories over and over all again, he's good. And the gifts are wonderful and marvelous. But the largest gift is you making a space in your life for someone else. Because this is what God has done for us in Christmas. God has opened a place at a stable where we can come, where we can reach out, where we can know how good we are and how good all people are. Takes a pregnant woman to really know it, I guess. To really know that you have to make a space in your life in order for an other to have a space for their life as well. Well, the rest of you men out here, we'll just have to take their word for it. But for you women,